Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan, and today we're going to be discussing the most disappointing player from every single NHL team so far this season. Now, we've seen a bunch of players on each team be great, surpass expectations, and be really surprisingly good, but on the flip side, we've also seen a ton of players in the NHL this year just not really come up to expectation and, quite frankly, be pretty disappointing this season. But when it comes to the most disappointing players in the league, who are the most disappointing players for your favorite NHL team? And just in general in the NHL, who are the most disappointing players this season? Watch till the end for all the rankings and all the picks, and hit that subscribe button if you're new. We are so close now to 32K as well, so every bit helps. And if you are new, hit that subscribe button for more hockey videos just like this. Now, as you can tell, I'm not exactly in my ideal setup, but that's not going to stop me from doing what we do best, boys, and making some hockey videos. Now, we're going to start out today with the disappointing players for the Anaheim Ducks and work our way down in alphabetical order. And we're going to start out with the Anaheim Ducks' most disappointing player, and I'm going to go with centerman Sam Steele. Now, Sam Steele this season, production-wise, just hasn't been that great in general. In 15 games played, has 1 goal, 3 assists for 4 points, and with 42% expected goals, 4% too, he really hasn't been too consistently noticeable. There has been some other younger players that have really come up and played well, guys like Maxime Comtois, who have gotten off to great starts this season. But with Sam Steele, I expect him to be a lot more of an impactful player. He's 23 years old now. He's getting up there to the point where you need to start seeing some consistent production, and that just has not been the case for him. Really hoping the second half is better for him in general, because he still has talent and still has potential to be a good player for the Anaheim Ducks. Going on to the Arizona Coyotes, I'm going to go to another young player here that has a lot more excuses, is a lot younger, but I expected to have a little bit of a better start of the season, that being Barrett Hayton. Now, Barrett Hayton in 14 games played has 2 goals, 1 assist for 3 points, and when I'm watching the Arizona Coyotes, I thought he had a couple of first good games of the season, but I think just in general hasn't really been a big part of that Coyotes offense, and I think the Coyotes desperately need him to be. I mean, that Arizona offense is not good in general. They've had some great performances with guys like Dvorak and Connor Garland really playing well to start the season, but if the Arizona Coyotes are going to keep that playoff spot going, Barrett Hayton will definitely have to be a big part of that team going forward, not just this year, but in the future as well. Now going on to the Boston Bruins' most disappointing player, though. This is a guy that I had big expectations for this season. I thought had a big bad year last year, but I thought could rebound well. That being Boston Bruins winger Jake DeBrusk. Now, when I talk about rebounding, he hasn't done that whatsoever. In 9 games played this year, has 2 assists for 2 points, and when I watch the Boston Bruins in the games he has played, he has definitely lived up to those point totals. He's just been absolutely invisible in a lot of different areas, and as a guy that unfortunately drafted him on my fantasy team, I'm not exactly too happy right now, but he does have potential still. He is 24 years old, but this is definitely one of those years that I think was needed to take that next step. Sadly, he's not playing the Toronto Maple Leafs, which I think is a big factor, but just in general, he's not been consistent nor good at all this year. Then going on to the Buffalo Sabres' most disappointing player, they've had a few guys that are more on the disappointing end, but I think in general, I would say, I think Eric Staal is probably their most disappointing player up to this point. In 12 games played, he has 3 goals, 2 assists for 5 points. Those are not terrible numbers for Eric Staal, but he was at a pretty good point per game pace, especially last year for the Minnesota Wild, and I think Eric Staal is a guy that has potentially be great offensively. I think he's been solid on defense, and I think he's brought that veteran leadership to the Buffalo Sabres, but the offense, I think, definitely could be improved throughout the season, and I think there's more that Eric Staal can give. Going on to the Calgary Flames, though, this is a team that just basically all of their players almost have been a little bit more on the disappointing side, at least most of the roster, but there hasn't been really one standout guy that's been super disappointing. The guy I'll go with is Dylan Dubé. I still think he's been decent this year. In 13 games, has 6 points, and he's 22 years old, so it's not like it's a make or break season for him, but he was great in the playoffs last year, especially versus Dallas, and I thought he could take that truly big next step. That really hasn't been the case, but I think it's still fine. Dylan Dubé will still be a good NHL player. And now we're going to head on to the Carolina Hurricanes' most disappointing player this season, and I am definitely going to go with Hayden Fleury. Now, Hayden Fleury is a guy that, in terms of age, he's 24 years old right now and should really be coming into his own. Last year, I thought I had a pretty solid season for the Carolina Hurricanes, especially in the playoffs. I thought he looked good, but this year has really been a non-factor. In 12 games played, has 0 points, pretty much even when it comes to expected goals, 4% as well, and he's just been kind of average. Now, going on to the next team, though, we're going to go on to the Chicago Blackhawks. We're going to go on to another defenseman, this on the younger side, though, as well, in Ian Mitchell. Now, I still think Ian Mitchell will become a very solid NHL defenseman, but he hasn't been fantastic for the Chicago Blackhawks this year. In 18 games, has 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points, and in terms of advanced analytics, is kind of just there. And now we're going to go on to the Colorado Avalanche most disappointing player, and I'm going to go with depth player in JT Compher. Now, JT Compher, I didn't expect to be a first-line player or anything this year, but I expect him to take a pretty good role in that middle six, and so far that just really hasn't been the case. In 13 games played, has 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points, and he's 25 years old. He is, or supposed to be, in his prime right now, and he's just been a major non-factor for the Colorado Avalanche. They need guys like him to step up, and they're willing to sustain that winning, and I think Compher definitely needs to step up as well. Then going on to the Columbus Blue Jackets, though, there's been a couple of specific players that have definitely been on the disappointing end, but I'm going to go with goaltender Joonas Korpisalo. Now, Joonas Korpisalo was fantastic in the playoffs last year versus the Leafs, and I saw so many people touting him as this amazing starter already, and I think he was a solid goaltender at that point, and I thought had a great playoffs, but I wanted to see what he would do in the regular season, and so far this season, he's just been bad, to put it bluntly. In 12 games played up to this point, he has an .887 save percentage, a -7 goals saved above expected, which right now is 7th worst in the National Hockey League. He just hasn't been great this year. I think the potential is there for him to be a starter, but I think people kind of jumped the gun a little bit too much, and I think he's showing why goaltenders especially are kind of wacky and need more patience. Now going on to my favorite team in the Dallas Stars, and my pick is going to go to centerman Radek Faksa. Now there's been some players offensively that have really exploded, guys like Joe Pavelski who've been great, but Radek Faksa has been kind of disappointing this year in terms of production and just overall play, I would say. In 12 games played up to this point, has 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points, and Fox is a guy that I think could reach around 30 points, 40 points in his prime, and he has done that before, and I think there is more that Fox can bring. It just hasn't been up to snuff this season, but I do think that will change. Going on to the Detroit Red Wings, though, and this is a team that's had quite a few disappointing players. They've just been bad as expected so far this year, though. But one guy that I don't really see mentioned too much in the disappointing players conversation this year is Dylan Larkin. Now, of course, Dylan Larkin this offseason was named the captain for Detroit and took the bigger leadership role for that team, and so far this season hasn't really backed it up when it comes to production. In 18 games, has 4 goals, 5 assists for 9 points, and a 47% expected goals for percentage as well. He's just kind of been solid. He's been all right, but hasn't really been up to that kind of 2019 level that we saw with Dylan Larkin in the past. But we're going to go on to the Edmonton Oilers next, and this is a player that I had some decent hopes could maybe rebound with the Oilers this year after some bad years with the Nashville Predators, but he has played, I think, his worst season yet so far and has been absolutely horrendous, that being Kyle Turris. Now, Kyle Turris in 18 games, in 18 games up to this point, has 1 goal, 2 assists for 3 points, and when I'm watching the Edmonton Oilers, I mean, he is more in the depth role, obviously, but Turris is definitely one of the least impressive, least productive Oilers every time I watch Edmonton. He is seriously one of the most confusing, frustrating players to watch on that team because I still think he has talent. I mean, you can see what he was able to do with the Ottawa Senators in prior years and what the level he was able to be at before, but this is just not the same player. Now going on to the Florida Panthers' most disappointing player, my pick is going to go to Noel Acciari. Now, Acciari has been really just not there at all for the Florida Panthers this season. In 12 games played, has 0 goals, 0 assists, 0 points so far. And with Noel Acciari, I thought he was one of the more underrated, sneaky players in the NHL these past couple of seasons. I think he got like 20 goals last year and was a really solid under-the-radar player. But this year, there has just not been anything to his game, really. He's just been kind of there as well, especially offensively, where I just don't think he's been given as much of an opportunity, but I just don't think it's been good in his own right whatsoever, too. He has the talent. We've seen that before, but this year it seems like it's kind of all just fallen apart for him. Then going on to the LA Kings, though, this is a player that I'm going to take some flack for saying is at this spot, but I don't think has been really great for LA, that being Gabriel Vilardi. Now, I still love Gabriel Vilardi's story, and I think he still will be a very, very solid player for the LA Kings, but this year, I did expect more. Now, so far in 11 games played, he has 3 goals, 2 assists for 5 points, but he's been one of the worst defensive players in the LA Kings this year, one of the least productive ones in terms of 5-on-5 play as well this season for the LA Kings, and he is on the LA Kings, yes, and he has been used more in the depth role, I would say, but I expected more of Vilardi with how good he was in those few games to end last year. He was a player that I thought could be a big part of the LA Kings team this season, and that just has not been the case, as other guys have kind of just taken that role and gone away with it. Then going on to the Minnesota Wild, though, this is a player that I thought has had a couple of solid seasons in the past couple of years, but this is a player that was expected to have some major responsibility for the Minnesota Wild, and just has been horrible, that being Nick Bonino. Now, Nick Bonito so far in 11 games played has 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points, and especially defensively, in pretty much every area for the Minnesota Wild, has not just been one of their worst centers, but one of their worst players in general. And with the ice time he's given, with the teammates he's been given, he's played a lot with Kirill Kaprizov in the first few games. He has just not been good enough and has just flat out been bad. Let's be honest here. And now we're going to go on to the Montreal Canadiens' most disappointing player, and I'm going to go with goaltender Carey Price. Now, there will be some people that say Danault or Tatar, and I think those guys have also been disappointing in their own right in some respects, but I think Carey Price is a guy that should be better this year than what he's shown so far. He was very, very solid last year. I thought took some big steps forward, especially in the playoffs, where I thought he played some of his best hockey ever, and this was a guy that I thought if the Montreal Canadiens were going to be at an elite level, he needed to be at a great level. Now, Montreal has still been good in general, and Carey Price has not been that great, and I think that just shows how solid Montreal is in terms of roster and in terms of players, but Carey Price, I think, does need to be better. He's just been kind of there, kind of not really too productive, and I think definitely needs to step up. Hello. Okay, well, going on to the Nashville Predators, my most disappointing player pick is going to go to Ryan Johansson. Now, there is a lot of quality options on the Nashville Predators here. Their whole team has been disappointing almost, but Johansson, I think, definitely fits the bill so far. And in the amount of games he played at this point, he has 4 assists for 4 points, and it's really just not been at any level that he should be. I mean, Johansson has definitely been one of the most inconsistent, disappointing players in the last few years, especially when it comes to his contract, which is looking like an absolute albatross for the Nashville Predators. Then going on to the New Jersey Devils, though, there's a couple of options here, I would say, but the big one for me is Nikita Gusev. In 9 games played, Gusev has 1 assist, 1 point, and has a 41% expected goals for percentage as well. Gusev has definitely been one of the most underwhelming, sad players to watch in the Devils this year, because last year he was one of the most electrifying, solid, exciting players out there in his first season with the New Jersey Devils, and this year it seems like that's kind of been just strapped away from him, or something like, I don't know, maybe somebody from heaven just bolted down and took all the talent away from him. Now we're going to go on to the New York Islanders, though, and my pick is going to go to Brock Nelson. He hasn't been bad this year, but I think there should be some more results than what we're seeing. In 15 games so far, has 3 goals, 3 assists for 6 points. I think he's gotten as well, kind of like Johansson, a little bit unlucky this year, 5-on-5, but the results should be better. This is a player that was great and solid and consistent for the New York Islanders last year, and that just has not been the case this year, sadly, especially for him and the Owls. Now we're going to go on to the New York Rangers, though, and there's a couple of players here that I'm not going to go with Alexis Lafreniere, but I'm going to go with Mika Zibanejad. Now, Mika Zibanejad, to me, has been the most disappointing New York Ranger, and it's not really close for me. Even though Alexis Lafreniere is not producing that great, to me, Zibanejad should be better than this. In 14 games played, has 1 goal, 2 assists for 3 points, and I just don't think he's playing good whatsoever. Now, I didn't see him sustaining what he had last year, but he has just not played good either. It's not like he's getting unlucky. He's playing like the amount of points he has, which is not great at all. This is a player who should be a #1 center for the New York Rangers, and right now is playing like an AHL forward right now, especially 5-on-5, where he should be a lot better. And now we're going to move on to the Ottawa Senators, and my most disappointing player pick is going to go to Derek Stepan. Now, they haven't really had too many totally disappointing players, but I think Stepan fits the bill the most, especially with Matt Murray being a lot better as of late. When it comes to Stepan so far, in 17 games, has 1 goal, 3 assists for 4 points, and the Sens gave up quite a bit to get him. I think they gave up like a 2nd-round pick back when they got him this past offseason, and he's supposed to be a guy that should be a consistent, solid player for them. I saw some signs of decline with the Arizona Coyotes, but he has just been bad this year for the Sens in general, and that trade is looking worse and worse by the day. Going on to the Philadelphia Flyers, though, my pick for them is going to be Carter Hart. In 9 games played, Carter Hart has an .897 save percentage, a -6.4 or 14 goals saved above expected, which right now is 10th worst in the NHL when it comes to starters. Carter Hart was a guy that I was expecting to win the Vezina Trophy this year, be a big part of that Philadelphia Flyers team. Obviously, those expectations should not have been that high because he's just been kind of for the Flyers. But I think definitely has potential to be better. He will be better. It's just this year he's kind of run into that funk. We'll see how he does with Philadelphia returning. Now we're going to go on to the Pittsburgh Penguins, though, and there's a couple of big-time ones. You got Tristan Jarry, who's an excellent pick, but to me, Evgeny Malkin has just kind of been He's not really been Evgeny Malkin that we've seen before, especially last year where he was way above a point per game, was ridiculous offensively. Even that has not been good this year. Right now, as it stands, in 14 games played, has 3 goals, 4 assists for 7 points. He's on pace right now for half a point per game. In a normal season, 41 points. Evgeny Malkin. That's crazy to think about, especially with how good he was last year. There's just been a little bit less pop to his game, I think. A lot less luck as well, but he's just not been up to the level that we should expect from him. Then going on to the San Jose Sharks, though, my pick is definitely going to go to Erik Karlsson. Erik Karlsson this year has been flat out horrible, and this is coming from one of the biggest Erik Karlsson fans out there. I love Erik Karlsson, especially in his prime. I thought he was one of the best defensemen ever, and this is a guy that should be better. It's obvious, though, that the injuries have kind of gone against him, and so far right now in 13 games played is 4 points, and it's just not been good on offense or defense for the San Jose Sharks, which is a big reason why, just in general, they played bad to start out this season. Next up, we're going to go to the St. Louis Blues' most disappointing player, and for me, there's a few guys there that have not been up to amazing levels, but to me, Colton Parayko might be the most disappointing. Now, he hasn't been terrible this year. He's still been solid, but I think defensively especially is where he's just been kind of not really as good as I would expect. I'm a big Colton Parayko fan. This year, in terms of actual stats, in 16 games played, is 1 goal, 7 assists for 8 points. I think offensively has been very productive and very solid for the Blues, but you've seen guys like Justin Falk who have been great this year, and Parayko, I think, has taken a big step back in terms of defense. Right now, in terms of expected goals against per 60, he's worst on the St. Louis Blues this season. Then going out of the Tampa Bay Lightning, my pick is going to go to Erik Cernak. Now, Cernak was very solid for the Tampa Bay Lightning in this past year or so. Wasn't a guy that absolutely blows you away, but does a lot of the little things correctly, and I think is a pretty decent part of that Tampa Bay Lightning defense. And the defense for Tampa has, I think, taken a little bit of a step back this season. I think Cernak is a big reason why. In terms of stats so far in 12 games played, has 3 assists for 3 points, but I think in terms of the defense, in terms of the overall game, there's been a little bit of a step back. I think he put a lot of heart into the playoffs, and you saw that throughout that run, but this regular season, I think the step back has been pretty obvious. Now going on to the Toronto Maple Leafs, though, there's a couple of guys that I would say are in this category. In terms of performance, maybe I would go John Tavares, but I think Ilya Mikheyev, I think, should be at a better level than what he's shown so far this season. Now, the meme himself in 17 games played has 1 goal, 3 assists for 4 points, and he's been giving a big opportunity. He's on the second line a lot of the time with guys like Tavares and Nylander, and he's been a big part of that middle six in the past for Toronto, but this year, it's just not really been that great. Sadly, it seems like that injury might be still nagging on him, it looks like, but this is a guy that was great last year for Toronto, super good when he was playing, and is a guy that absolutely should be a big part of that Toronto forward group, and it's just so far has not been the case. Now going on to the Vancouver Canucks, though, this is a guy that had 20 goals last year. In terms of production, was very, very solid for the Canucks last year. And this year was a year that I thought he would step back, but still be a pretty decent part of that forward group. And he definitely needed to be if Vancouver was going to be a big contender this year, that being Jake Virtanen. Now, Jake Virtanen in 15 games has 1 goal for 1 point. And I'm just going to move on from here because that's really all that needs to be said when it comes to Virtanen. Then going on to the Vegas Golden Knights, my pick is going to go to big-time defenseman free agent in Alex Pietrangelo. Now, Alex Pietrangelo, I still think, is one of the better defensemen in the NHL, especially when it comes to offense. But this year, whenever I watch Vegas, he's gotten a lot of ice time, but hasn't really backed it up with any results so far. In 11 games played, has 1 goal, 3 assists for 4 points. And in terms of offense, where he really should be fantastic, he's right now a 45% expected goals for percentage, 5 below the average in terms of offense, even strength, and I think definitely should be bigger than what he has shown so far. Obviously, he's on a new team, and it's the first year of his new contract, so we'll wait and see, but so far the start hasn't exactly been too promising. Then going on to the Washington Capitals, next up, I'm going to go with another defenseman in Dmitry Orlov. Now, Dmitry Orlov has been a big offensive defenseman in the past for the Washington Capitals, big part of that team, and big part of that decor in the past. But this year, that's just not really been the case. In 9 games played, has 0 points whatsoever. It just has not really been obviously not been on the score sheet, but hasn't really been a factor for the Washington Capitals. And I think they definitely need him to step up. He's a guy that, especially during that Cup run in 2018, was a huge part of that team. In 2019 was solid, and it's just been a solid top 4 defenseman for a long time. But he's a guy that Washington definitely relies upon a lot, and this year just has not backed it up whatsoever. Really hoping that changes for the Washington Capitals' sake. Then going on to the Winnipeg Jets, though, I'm going to go with our last player on the list, and this is the player that in terms of raw point production has still been good, but in terms of the overall play and the little things you need to look out for, he's just not been good this year, and I think deserves some more blame, especially within the organization that he's gotten, that being Blake Wheeler. Now, as an American, obviously Blake Wheeler has a lot of respect on his name, but this year so far, he points-wise has still done well. In 16 games played, 5 goals, 9 assists for 14 points, 8 power play points, so more than half of his production is coming in the power play. And I think overall, Blake Wheeler, when you watch the Winnipeg Jets, but just in terms of analytics as well, he's just not good overall whatsoever. He's never really been a great defensive forward, but right now his expected goals against per 60 is 3rd worst in terms of forwards in the league right now. And when it comes to eye test, it definitely backs it up. He has been on another world in terms of bad defensive play. He has been horrible in his own zone this year, but he's a guy that should be better. I think will be better, but defensively needs to step up big time and take some of the blame that he should be putting on himself. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that notification bell if you're not already. Comment down below your thoughts. What are the most disappointing player for your favorite NHL team, and who you think is the most disappointing player right now in the NHL so far? Make sure you share this video with your friends, get it out there, and click on this card for all my hockey rankings content. Right on one playlist. My name is Nathan. Thanks so much for tuning in. My hands are literally freezing, so I'll see you in the next video or stream. Goodbye.